When we think about some of the symptoms that people with PTSD experience, it's often useful for us to use the acronym DREAMS, DREAMS, to help us remember those all-important symptoms. So the D stands for detachment. This is where we begin to detach from the people around us, we detach from the community, we detach ourselves from socializing, we isolate ourselves, we give up on our jobs, for example, and we don't express our thoughts and feelings. We keep it all to ourselves. We detach ourselves from the world. Part of the reason for that is thought to be that people with post-traumatic stress disorder have, in many cases, in most cases, experienced some dreadful, stressful event, and they don't feel able yet to talk about it. They often don't think that people around them would understand. They often think that people around them wouldn't want to hear about these dreadful things that have happened that their loved one has experienced. So one of the big symptoms of PTSD is where the individual keeps it all to himself or herself. They keep it locked deep inside. Detachment. Okay. The R stands for re-experiencing the event. So you may have seen in the movies, for example, where soldiers have returned from Vietnam or other active combat situations, and they re-experience the trauma that they experienced in combat. So, for example, if they hear a loud noise all of a sudden, automatically they'll jump on the ground and cover their heads, thinking that a bomb has gone off or somebody is shooting at them, for example. So something happens back home, and straight away it brings the individual back to that initial traumatizing event. Okay, we see it also, for example, where people have experienced PTSD as a result of an attack, for example, or a car accident. So the person may be driving along in their car and another car gets close to them, and straight away they feel all of those symptoms that they felt immediately after the traumatizing accident that they experienced. Okay, so we re-experience the event time and time again. Very often people re-experience the event in their dreams. So at night time, they imagine that they're back there in the traumatizing situation. Okay. The E stands for emotional effects. So oftentimes people with PTSD will also experience a whole range of negative emotions, such as anxiety, depression, worry, panic attacks. Okay. The A stands for avoidance. This is where the person with PTSD begins to avoid situations that they feel could potentially be very threatening. So in that example I gave a short while ago about somebody who's perhaps developed PTSD as a result of a horrendous car accident, they might give up driving. They might avoid being a passenger in a car. Okay. Somebody who has experienced high levels of stress in a combat situation might begin to avoid talking about military topics. They might turn over the TV when a war film comes on, for example. Okay. The M in the acronym stands for months in duration. So usually, according to the DSM-3 and more recently the DSM-5, for example, there's a certain amount of months that the person must have been experiencing these symptoms in order to have been given a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, and we'll come on to that duration shortly. Okay, the final letter in the acronym is S for sympathetic hyperactivity. What does that mean? It also means hypervigilance. This is where, for example, again, using that example of a car accident, people become hypervigilant and they're very closely They're closely watching out for any potential chance of another accident. So, for example, they will scan their environment with their eyes, they will listen very carefully, and they'll be on edge all the time, watching and waiting for a traumatic event to happen again. So if they're driving in their car, they'll be driving much slower than they used to drive. They'll be looking very closely at all the cars and vehicles around them for any potential signs that these vehicles are going to cause another accident. Very often when somebody's hypervigilant as a result of a car accident, they'll also be looking in their rear view mirror very closely to check the distance behind them from the back of their car to the front of the car that's immediately behind them. And the closer that third party vehicle gets, the more tense and anxious the individual becomes. Okay, so those are some of the telltale symptoms of PTSD. Remember the acronym DREAMS: detachment, re-experiencing the event, emotional effects, avoidance, a number of months in duration, and sympathetic hyperactivity or hypervigilance. Okay? Thank you very much. Speak to you shortly.